1 in 4. That is the share of homes sold to investors in some American cities. Not Wall Street banks, not hedge funds, investors. Your neighbor is not losing their home to BlackRock. The story is stranger than that. And the government's solution, signed by the president in January, is aimed at the wrong target entirely. This video is about who is actually buying American homes, how it is happening in specific zip codes in ways most people have never seen, what the legislation actually does and does not do, and the part of this story that nobody in Washington or Wall Street wants you to notice. Let's follow the money. Ask most Americans who is buying up family homes, and they will say, BlackRock. That story went viral. Politicians repeated it. News anchors repeated it. There is one problem. It is wrong. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager. It manages $10 trillion of other people's money in index funds. It does not buy single-family homes. Its own director of corporate affairs said it plainly in January 2026. We don't buy single-family homes. The company people are confusing BlackRock with is Blackstone. Different company, different business model. And even Blackstone, the actual large buyer, has been selling homes for 2 years. Their institutional purchases of single-family homes are down over 90% since 2022. They are net sellers of homes right now. So President Trump signed an executive order in January 2026 banning large institutional investors from buying single-family homes. The Senate passed the 21st Century Road to Housing Act to make it permanent law. And the target of that legislation, the large institutional buyer, had already largely left the building. This is not a story about BlackRock. It never was. The real story is far more complicated and far less visible. Here is what is actually happening in the American housing market. Large institutional investors own just 0.35% of the US housing stock nationally. That is a real number confirmed by the Government Accountability Office in March 2026. But zoom in to specific zip codes in specific cities, and the picture changes completely. In Atlanta, in the fourth quarter of 2021, 41% of all home sales went to investors. Not one investor. Investors plural, across all sizes. In Phoenix and Las Vegas, 36% of home sales. San Jose, 38%. And in some specific suburban zip codes in Atlanta, institutional investors own more than 50% of actively listed rental homes. The national average of 0.35% is mathematically accurate and deeply misleading at the same time. Because when investors buy 41% of homes in Atlanta, those homes are not evenly spread across the city. They are concentrated in specific neighborhoods, specific zip codes, specific price ranges. The family trying to buy their first home in a specific Atlanta suburb is not competing with 0.35% investor ownership. They are competing with 50%. That is the story the national statistics hide. How does an investor buy 41% of homes in a market? Not by walking into open houses, not by working with real estate agents, by using software. Large single-family rental companies use proprietary algorithms to scan every listing in a target market. The software identifies homes that fit the investment criteria and submits cash offers within hours of listing, sometimes within minutes. A first-time home buyer needs 30 to 60 days to secure financing, gets a mortgage contingency, negotiates back and forth. An institutional investor submits a cash offer, no contingency, closes in 10 days. The seller takes the cash offer every time. This is not illegal. It is not a conspiracy. It is a structural advantage that no amount of saving or preparation can overcome for a regular buyer competing in the same market. And here is what makes the legislation complicated. The Trump executive order targets investors owning more than 1,000 homes. The Senate bill targets investors owning more than 350 homes. But the buyers using these algorithmic tools in your market right now, the ones buying 1 in 4 homes in specific cities, are mostly smaller investors, owning between 10 and 1,000 homes, not covered by the legislation. The law targets the big fish. The market is full of medium fish, and nobody is counting them. There is one more thing the legislation does not address. The large institutional investors who are retreating from buying existing homes are not leaving the housing market. They are changing strategy, build to rent. Instead of buying existing homes and converting them to rentals, they are now building entire new communities designed from the ground up as rental-only developments. Streets of houses that look like suburbs, but where not a single home will ever be sold to an individual buyer. The homes are built to be rented forever. The executive order banning institutional purchases of single-family homes does not cover build-to-rent developments, because no purchase of an existing home is happening. The investor is the original developer. So the legislation solves one problem: large investors buying your existing home, while a new market structure grows around it. A market where the houses on your street are built by investors for investors, where home ownership in that community was never on the table. Nobody is talking about this part. So, does investor buying actually raise home prices for regular buyers? The honest answer, based on the most current academic research, is yes, but less than you think, and with a complication nobody talks about. A Brookings Institution analysis published in February 2026 found that in markets with high institutional concentration, yes, home prices were modestly higher. The investor buying drove up purchase prices, but the same research found that rents in those areas were lower, because when investors convert owned homes to rentals, they increase rental supply. More rental supply means lower rents, so institutional investors are simultaneously making home ownership slightly more expensive and making renting slightly cheaper. In the same market, the bigger driver of unaffordability is simpler and harder to fix. America has not built enough homes for decades. The housing shortage is structural. It is zoning laws. It is construction costs. It is permitting delays. It is NIMBYism. It is the 2008 financial crisis, wiping out an entire generation of small home builders who never came back. Banning institutional investors from buying existing homes removes a buyer from the market. That helps individual buyers compete, but it does not build a single new home. The shortage does not shrink. The competition just changes shape. Here is what I want you to take from this video. The story everyone told you, BlackRock is buying your neighborhood, was wrong. The legislation everyone celebrated, the executive order, the Senate bill, is aimed at buyers who were already leaving. The real forces reshaping American home ownership right now are three things. First, small and medium investors using algorithmic tools to outcompete individual buyers in specific markets. These buyers are largely untouched by current legislation. Second, build-to-rent developers constructing entire communities where home ownership will never be available. The ban does not cover this. Third, the structural housing shortage that nobody in Washington has a plan to solve. We are building approximately half the homes per year we need to keep up with population growth. The American dream of home ownership is becoming harder to access. That part is real, but the villain is more complicated than a single company name. And the solution requires building millions of homes, not just restricting who can buy the ones that exist. Nobody in Washington will say that plainly, because building homes requires changing zoning laws. Changing zoning laws makes homeowners angry. Angry homeowners vote. So instead, we get an executive order targeting a retreating industry, and the real problem grows. Before the last piece, I want to be fair. Institutional investors did cause real harm in concentrated markets. The 41% investor share of Atlanta home sales in 2021 was real. The algorithmic buying that locked individual families out of specific markets was real. The executive order and the Senate bill are not nothing. In the specific zip codes where large institutional ownership was highest, removing that buying pressure will help. But the headlines told you Wall Street was buying your neighborhood. The truth is more complicated and more disturbing. The big institutional buyers have already left. They sold. The people buying your neighborhood now are smaller investors you have never heard of, using software you have never seen. In markets, your government is not watching, and the legislation designed to stop it, signed with great fanfare in January, is targeting a problem that largely already solved itself, while the real problem grows quietly in the background. Nobody told you any of this. Nobody asked you if this was acceptable. If this video helped you understand something the news hasn't explained plainly, share it with one person who needs to hear it. That's how this channel grows. Not through clickbait, through information that actually matters. We post every week. Subscribe if you want to know what's coming next, because there's a lot more coming.